Hello, everybody, and welcome to this first seminar in our series 2021 Vision, the year ahead in software quality management. My name is Matthew Crabbe. I'm the CEO of QA Financial. This series is a series of 6 seminars where we're going to be looking at the key topics in software quality management facing financial firms. We're going to be looking at the challenges and the solutions that both firms are working on. And again, thank you very much for joining us. A couple of pieces of housekeeping, if you like, how you should be using this platform. There is a help button, a little red help button to the top right of your screen. If you're having any kind of technical issues, click on that, and there are people there who can help you. But you do really have to use Chrome for this platform. So if you are having problems, please try again and use Chrome if you're not. To the top left of your screen, you can see a link that takes you back to your timeline. And when you click on that, it also takes you back to our virtual exhibition hall. And you can visit our series sponsors there, Broadcom in their stand, and also our sponsor for today's session, Tricentis. They have a stand there as well, where you can download white papers, video content. You can also chat with representatives of those firms if you want to talk in greater detail about well, anything at all, but in particular anything that we discussed today. And then there's also a stand for our own QA Vector analytics platform, which is a software quality benchmarking platform that we've launched. So that's the housekeeping done. We want to make this session and other sessions as interactive as possible. And if you have any questions, first of all, you can write them. You can see the Q&A, the live Q&A button on the panel on your screen. Just write a question, and we'll answer them either towards the end, or we can tackle them as they come up, and if they're relevant to a point one of our panelists is discussing. So please do ask questions, anything you like, and please feel free to join the conversation. So our panelists today, and we're very grateful for their time and attention to this. We've obviously had a discussion about what we're going to cover. Rochak Lamba from Google. His focus at Google, he's based in London, is on Google's capital markets firms, clients, and the companies it works with. So I'm very interested to hear a little more about his role there. Alan Woodcock from Lloyds Bank will be joining us. We have Clinton Sprauve from Tricentis, the test automation specialist, Vienna and US based. Clinton's joining us from the US. And we also have, very pleased to welcome Djamel Mostefa from Orange Bank in Paris. So Orange Bank is one of the disruptors in the French retail banking market, and Djamel heads up AI at Orange Bank. Now, we're very well aware that although the title of this session is AI and automation, that these are two different things, that they should perhaps be looked at separately. And we will be doing that, but we of course want to talk about the changes that financial firms, including banks, but other financial firms as well, are seeing in demand from their customers for better apps faster, and how you deliver those. It could be automation, it could be AI, it could be a combination of both. So we feel they're very much linked. And we also want to talk about how you also benchmark the improvements that you've achieved. So we're talking about testing. We're going to be talking about testing, automated testing, and also testing the outputs of artificial intelligence. But we also want to talk a little bit more about how how firms know that the software they're producing, the apps they're delivering, are not only being delivered faster and in greater volumes, but they're actually better. And we've seen once again over the past week or so, with the issues that the Australian Stock Exchange faced, for example, the major financial firms, major trading venues, customer-facing financial firms, it's imperative that their software is not just that there's more of it, but it's delivered more quickly, but that it works. And financial firms in that respect are different from other companies. We run events in the retail sector, for example, where leading UK retailers and other retailers have said, well, the way we know our software works is because it works. If it doesn't work, then we know we have to fix it. That doesn't work for financial firms. And increasingly, regulators are looking at how firms are setting standards and then even discussing industry standards for software quality. And we believe this is a trend for the next couple of years and beyond. So I think that's enough from me for the time being. I'd like to go straight to our first speaker, our first panelist, Rochak from Google, Rochak Lamba. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your role and also the customers you're talking to and what the key challenges they're talking about with you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. So to start off with, I'm at Google. My title is an industry architect for capital markets, and I'm a software engineer. I started my industry within markets. I've covered lots of different roles, but I used to be at Morgan Stanley for a number of years and Goldman Sachs for 7 years, and then I did also a 2-year stint at London Stock Exchange. So having been in these institutions, I was part of developing software, automating software, testing various different types of applications from front office to back office, and even marketing those to clients. So for me, I've seen a lot of pain points within capital markets, and my role at Google is to stay connected to the industry, but take our products that we have at Google to market, to make them available and make them actionable more around capital market oriented use cases and problems that I've been familiar with for so many years. Yeah.
Good. And what would you say, if you don't mind looking into your crystal ball a little, I mean, what are the key challenges that the people you speak to are trying to address over the next 12 months? We've heard a lot, for example, about how one of the impacts of COVID, for example, has been to accelerate demand for faster app delivery. I'm not sure how much that's true of capital markets firms, for example, compared to retail-facing firms, retail banks, insurance companies, for example, who are dealing with clients who are doing much more online as a result of COVID and various lockdowns. But what in your space do you think are the objectives for next year? I mean, what proportion of automation are they trying to achieve, and what potential do they see in AI, in software development?
Sure. Look, it's a great question, and I think you've talked about retail and the kinds of automation that we've seen with fintechs and organizations going in that space. But if you follow the value chain of the financial service ecosystem, investment banking and capital markets are sort of that next level after retail. So when you think about mortgages, for example, most consumers go to the retail markets, and fintechs are in the space of automating a lot around the mortgages. But those mortgages, those products that they get, the loans, the interest rates they get, often they come from mortgage-backed securities that are provided by investment banks. And so I guess if you think about it, if the retail market is starting to get automated and starting to get more efficient, that indirectly is leading to pressures in capital markets as well. The kind of things we've seen in capital markets, having been in there and also dealing with the clients, is that there's a lot of focus around automation. So within the product suite of capital markets, you have equities, you have fixed income, and then you have commodities, and there's currencies. So all these asset classes tended to have their own architectures, own business units, and they still do at a majority front. But a lot of the questions are now being asked about how can we consolidate that? How can we start thinking about that consolidation of that architecture? How can we think about automating that workflow between what's happening from the point you get a trade or from the point when you get a quote to the point when it gets traded and action and sent down to the end front? So to your first question, Yeah, there is a lot of pressure happening within the capital markets around how that space is happening. It's not happening on the sell side there, but it's also happening on the buy side. So when we think about the kind of changes that are incidentally causing this, one was what we just talked about, the fintech revolution change, but the second is also regulatory and cost efficiency. So with the advent of MiFID II, there's a lot more of a focus around transparency and giving clients that availability of where is their investment going, how is that cost being spent. So all of those things require insights,
Yep.
and it requires ML and various different ways of extracting that insights and effectively creating more products. So to your last question around what are clients thinking about this and what are the kind of challenges around this space, it's around the category of clients are now starting to think about, well, how can we automate, i.e. be more efficient with what we're doing across all our businesses, but how can we also try to derive more insights and create new products and be more digital, right? And you've seen that with the likes of Goldman Sachs starting to enter the retail market with their Marcus product.
Yeah.
You can also see a lot of collaboration that they're doing with their own technology companies. So this is what's happening.
Actually, I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask you now as you mentioned MiFID. I mean, one of the things we're hearing is that one key challenge for capital markets firms going into next year is going to be Basel and the fundamental review of the trading book, which is fundamentally, pushing capital markets firms to link their trading desks to their risk engines in very directly in real time, and requires far more resources in terms of pricing models, and then testing software, making sure that those linkages and that connectivity is actually well established. Is that right? I mean, also involving the testing of all the trading and risk systems and making sure that they're connected in this new universe as well.
No, look, it's 100% right. And as I mentioned about regulatory space around MiFID II, FRTB is a great example of that. So with FRTB, it's all around consistency. So how do you mark and price your products across your risk books versus your model books, versus your reporting lines? They all need to be aligned. So you have to choose a set of methodology, calculate it consistently, and that requires scale. That requires technology where you can consistently apply the same model across the same models, same applications, but also making it correct. And that's where QA plays a bigger role, which is ensuring that you're actually calculating in the right way across your different workflows.
And how does Google, help in that respect? I mean, we know about Google Cloud, but what about Google QA? What do you do with your client firms?
Yeah, look, that's another great question. So firstly, I'll just say about FRTB. We as Google, we've actually created a product which is very specific to FRTB, right? So how do you do that? How do you do that calculation? And when we think about QA, and when we think about, so firstly, that product is called Avera AI. That's about risk calculation for FRTB, very specific. And I'm happy to share more details about it if anyone's interested. But to your other point about how do you think about QA and how do we think about analyzing and ensuring the verification quality around that space, we've got a lot of tools that allow us to calculate those. So what we offer as Google is a cloud services, right? So we cover basically we're taking the products that we use internally, such as BigQuery, such as analyzing larger scales of data, such as calculating things on a grid. We're making those available to you as components, as building blocks that you can use to basically apply, get insights from it, utilize AI to do those kind of analysis. And to the point of how do you do QA, we basically accommodate or support and really give guidelines around application modernization. So utilizing CI/CD pipelines, applying different frameworks so that you can make a quality application that is consistent across the board. That's what we're in the business for, application development.
Okay, great, thank you. Clinton, let's move to you. So Tricentis, we know, is the leading test automation specialist, originally based in Vienna, as much a US firm as anything now, with the acquisition last year and the merger with QA Symphony. What are your customers' priorities? And what are their big challenges in automated testing and increasing the amount of automation they do. And tell us a little bit about what they're doing in AI and what you're doing in AI as well.
Sure, thank you, and really glad to be here today. For everyone, my name is Clint Sprauve, Director of Product Marketing and also Enterprise Strategist for Tricentis. So I would say the biggest priority for our customers is really just getting a strong handle on building resilient and consistent automation. And I think that's been the challenge just across multiple verticals, multiple industries, specifically in the financial sector. So when we work with various customers, they have teams of various skill sets. So they may have some that are test automation engineers, some that are software developers. So as they start to go through this digital transformation, their biggest challenge is understanding, hey, we have a mix of skill sets and we need to release software much faster than we've done in the past. And we also need to make sure that we're following, regulatory compliance as well. So their biggest challenge is, I've got all these different people. How do I make them much more efficient? And so our goal with Tricentis is to ensure that we can provide them not only model-based testing, but really make testing much easier for them. And we do that by enabling, we just recently released a solution called Vision AI, which is part of our Tosca platform, which helps enhance their test automation. So what we're doing today is really just trying to help them focus on building resilient and consistent automation and making sure that they can do that and taking it beyond, because I think the biggest problem that a lot of organizations are running into is that they're struggling with with digital transformation. And part of that digital transformation is just implementing DevOps. And there's so many different implementations of how you do DevOps and what does that look like from a tool stack. And so that's very confusing. So our job is to really help them understand, at least from the quality standpoint, how do you implement quality and consistent and continuous testing within the DevOps pipeline and take a realistic approach as opposed to more of a high level theory approach. So our goal is to work with them to make sure that they understand that. So as companies start to go through this digital transformation, I think it's imperative that they really understand, not only just from, we're talking about AI today, but really understanding how do you develop test automation within that pipeline, keep it consistent, and be able to use the current resources that you have today.
Yeah, and we said at the outset of this session that automation and AI are two different things. But one of the big links here is how firms test the outputs of AI, and we've heard a lot about the issues of bias in AI, and that's been a focus of regulators around the world, asking financial firms how they are checking to make sure they eliminate bias and how you test for that, but also how you test chatbots, for example, whether they are actually providing the right answers to questions when they're being driven by AI to give those answers. How do we actually automate the testing that ensures that the answers are correct? I mean, is this something that you see an area where you see big changes and progress over the coming year?
Yes, definitely. And we're still, from a testing perspective, we're at the very early stages, right? So there's a lot going on at various companies. Of course, our colleague from Google and various other companies, they're doing, tremendous, breakthroughs and innovative things when it comes to AI. But from a testing perspective, we're still, at the very early adopter stages of that. And so as we start to work with customers and kind of help them understand, what is the best way to do automation, we really want to help them. And this is just in general across the board. And especially for financial firms, we want to make sure that they understand these are the things that are specific to building robust automation. So the goal is to really take a step back and understand, what does that process look like? And then understanding, okay, as we do start to implement AI, we look at some of those key areas. One is risk. Right? So how do we work with, identifying risk and being able to mitigate those risks using artificial intelligence to be able to, using machine learning to actually train the testing of that application. The other aspect of that is the self-healing aspect of tests. So when that application fails, whether it's on the front end, whether it's on the back end, whether it's through a services, understanding where that failure takes place. And when we talk about self-healing, not just recognizing that something's changed, but recognizing that, hey, this is part of the process that needs to be updated and modified and corrected so that you don't lose momentum as you're building that. So those are still some of the early stages, but what you're seeing is the self-healing aspect and the risk aspect of AI and machine learning that's really going to help catapult test automation for the future.
Okay, very good. And I was asking Rochak earlier about the impact of COVID. I'd like to ask you as well, because I mean, it is something that we're all still very much in the middle of. We've heard a lot about how COVID has been accelerating change in the way that customers are using apps and the service that they expect from their apps. How are you seeing that reflected in demand for the testing technologies that you work with?
Yes, we're seeing a huge demand because of COVID-19, and that being the fact that there are a lot of organizations, because of how they work today, they've had to make that shift to the cloud. And not just making the shift of, we've always talked about digital transformation and moving applications to the cloud and having them managed, but really taking a lot of their current processes and moving that to the cloud, their tooling and moving that to the cloud, and being able to do the testing as well. So what we're seeing is there's been this big influx of, hey, we can't, because of these restrictions, we can't maintain a lot of these things on-prem. So we need to move this to the cloud. So how can we do that? How can we test and make sure that that transition is going to be correct? And we're able to do that. So we're getting a lot of questions from prospects and customers saying, hey, we're going through this transition, and how can you help us? How can you help us do more in the cloud? Everything is making that transition. So the more that we can help them go through that process, the better they are. But COVID has played a huge role in just forcing organizations to work differently. And it's forced QA teams, because now they have to be much more distributed. Now, we've always done distributed work in various countries throughout the world, but now it's not a nice to have anymore. It's really a mandate. So we, even as a software development company, we have to adjust to that and make sure that our customers are successful, and giving them processes and methodologies around that in terms of how do they adjust to that transition. How do you manage a QA team that's much more distributed than what you had previously?
Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn now to Djamel Mostefa from Orange Bank, joining us from Paris. And Djamel is head of AI at Orange Bank. Djamel, could you please start by telling us a little bit about Orange Bank, because many of us not in France will recognize the name, but not know a great deal about the business. You're obviously a key digital challenger in the French market. But if you could tell us a little bit more about Orange Bank and your role. And then I know that we were going to talk with you a little bit about the critical role of data science in rethinking roles. I mean, we're talking about sort of revolutionary changes. We're talking about revolutionary changes in software development with AI and increased rates of automation. But I know that you've got some really interesting thoughts about the role of data and data scientists in those changes.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me in this very interesting panel. So just to give you a little bit of information about Orange Bank. So Orange Bank is a digital bank launched in November 2017, and we are operating in 3 areas right now. We are operating in France, in Spain, and in Africa, and we plan to open or to address different countries within Europe or in Africa. I'm managing the artificial intelligence department at Orange Bank. I'm more a technical guy, so I've been working for more than 15 years in AI and machine learning, and more specifically on what we call natural language processing, which includes speech recognition, machine translation, information retrieval, and all of those things. So I joined Orange Bank to develop and implement AI use cases. And since the launch of Orange Bank, AI has been used to offer the best user experience to its customers. The first AI use case is Jingo, which is a virtual assistant. It's a chatbot. Jingo handled more than 3 million conversations so far, and is, of course, expanding. And AI is also used in various domains, such as text mining. Text mining is the software that we develop internally that is able to understand the communication between customers and the bank. And we are also developing AI technologies for sentiment and opinion mining, market analysis, question answering, or fraud detection. The artificial intelligence roadmap is to improve, of course, the user experience and to automate processes with AI. And this is where AI and automation are very close, because we are using AI to automate the process. For instance, we are using AI to give automatic answers to customers that are sending an email to the bank. So the idea is AI and to push the AI technology to automate the different process that we can do. And so the idea is really to have AI that helps the employees of Orange Bank to deal with tasks that are not very easy to do. So this is the idea. The idea is really to use AI to give the best user experience, and also to have processes that are fully or partially processed with AI. What we see at Orange Bank, or what I see at Orange Bank, is that the main issue for implementing AI use case is not the technology or defining the use case. The main issue that we do have is always related to the data. It's quite difficult, or it's always complicated to have access to the data that feeds the machine learning or the artificial intelligence model. The first thing is to have access to the data. The second thing is to make sure that the data is of good quality, and so we have to assess the quality of the data, because you all know the thing that is if you have garbage in, you will get garbage out. So it's really important to assess the quality of the data and to correct the data of poor quality. And so in my team, so I have a team of around 10 to 15 people. They spend most of the time assessing the quality of the data or curating the data. And it's really important to make sure that the data that you are using is of good quality. Because as I said, if you are using the data of bad quality, well, bad quality can be understood as data that is biased. This is data of bad quality, but you have also data that have a lot of missing values or things like that, that makes the machine learning algorithm or model not performing as it could be. So this is really something that I want to stress on, is really the quality insurance on the data, because in the artificial intelligence and machine learning area on which we all are now, the algorithm is with data, and so it's really important to to assess the quality of the data before starting to implement your artificial intelligence model. One thing that I can also share with you regarding the use of artificial intelligence in the financial sector. So you all know that the financial sector is one of the most regulated one. And so what we see, at least in France, is that we have a lot of constraints regarding the use of AI. And the constraint is really on how to use very complex models like deep learning models. And the issue is not really on the implementation of a model of the data that we are using. The issue is about explicability. So when you have a very complex model, for instance, if you want to deploy a model on credit scoring, you can do that with a deep learning model. But at the end, you will not be able to explain why a demand has been or request has been rejected. And legally, as a bank, you should or you have to describe or to give an explanation to a customer for which a credit request has been refused. And this is why, at least at Orange Bank, but I think it's general in the financial sector, at least in Europe or in France, we are not using very complex model like deep learning, because even if we see that it have a lot of, that the performance are very good, we are not able to explain the decision that has been made on AI. We are not able to explain if the credit request has been rejected. Is it because of your revenue? Is it because of your of a number of member of the family of your family? Is it because of your age? So this kind of things is something that has been looked by the French regulator to see what kind of model can be used in the financial sector. They didn't come to a conclusion, but I think one thing that we need to work on if we want to use AI in the financial sector is this explainability issue. And I think this is the issue that we have for using AI at a large scale in the financial sector, at least in France.
And what about, thank you, that's really interesting, and that issue of bias is still so central to the discussion about AI. But what about performance testing for apps, especially for a challenger bank? When you're looking at data, you don't necessarily have the same data that your established competitors have. So where do you get that from? Do you get that from your vendor partners, for example? So
No.
The testing of you know, the outputs, for example, not so much bias, but the accuracy of in functional terms.
Yeah, this is really something that is important, because when we deploy an AI model, we have, of course, to assess the performance of the model, and this is done on a traditional way, I would say. So we do split. It's more technical, but maybe it's interesting for people to know how we assess the AI model. So when we have a large database, like for instance, we have been working on fraud detection. So what we do is that we split the data between training and tests. And so we train the data with, of course, we train the model based on the training data, which is 80% of the data, and we keep 20% of the data out of the training phase, and we evaluate the performance on the model on the unseen data of a model. This is for the starting point. But then you have to do that on a regular basis to make sure that the performance of your model is still up to date and that you have no degradation of the performance of the model. And this is something that you have to do on a regular basis. One thing that I would like to stress on is that when you deploy an artificial intelligence model or machine learning model, it doesn't mean that this is the end of a story. It means that every 2 months or every 3 months, you have to assess the quality and the performance of the model, and you have, of course, to update the model. For instance, for fraud detection, what we do usually every 2 months, we update the model. We make sure that we have no regression, so that the model performs better or as it was performing before. But this is something that you have to do. And so it's not a question of you deliver a model and then it will be working alone. It means that you really have to monitor the model and to make sure that the update of the model is performing better than the previous version. So this is really something that is important to understand, that this is a continuous work, and it's not a work that is finished when you have developed a model. You have to update it on a regular basis, and you have, of course, then to keep a team of data scientists that monitor the model and that retrain the model and make sure that it's performing well. So on the evaluation phase, how do we assess the model? It's really a classical way of doing that. We split the data between training and test, and we train on the training data, and we test, of course, on the test data, and we see what are the performance, and then we put it in production if we think that the performance is sufficient. If it's not the case, we have to rework to try to find new strategies, new algorithm to get better performance.
Thank you, Djamel. And Rochak, I'd like to come back to you on following on from the points that Djamel was making about the key role of data and data scientists in this transition, if you like, from thinking about automation to thinking about AI and embedding that, working towards embedding that in delivery processes. What's your experience in this area? What challenges are firms facing?
Yeah, sure. So let me talk about the Google's experience about it. So from Google, as you know, with Google, we have 9 applications or 9 products that have over 1 billion users, who use our application constantly. So we as a data company, we face problems around how do we utilize ML, AI, and automation the most effective way so that we can scale. And that's what's led us to release large number of products like Kubernetes and BigQuery around that space. But let me take you through how that works for us, because it sort of resonates with a lot of our capital market clients as well. So firstly, if you take any business problem, our theory is you should be taking it as your process. So what is your process that you're trying to do with any business problem? What are the inputs and outputs? And thinking about it, is it one person doing it? Can you scale that out to have multiple users doing it? So there's no one person as a bottleneck. And then how can you digitalize that process? So how can you automate it such that it can be done in a more effective fashion? So any problem, before we get into the ML AI space, we always try to just automate it and try to think about it from a pure systematic point of view, from an input-output point of view, logical means. Then we bring in a new block there, which is take the outputs and can we get some insights out of that? Any kind of process you talk about, right? From a creative flow, from a client interaction, whichever process you're talking about, we try to get insights out of it. And sometimes that's as far as you want to go. It may not be an AI ML problem. But what we do is once we've fine-tuned that and we've made that into an automated CI/CD process where we're getting insights and you're feeding that back into the process, then we go into around exploring ML AI. And exactly how Djamel was talking about it, we talk about introducing an AI model of any form which can be tuned. So you're constantly feeding in the data. And most of our applications, as I said, we have 9 products which have over 1 billion users, and we have a number of other products which have close to 1 billion users. And And what we're trying to do there is we try to simulate every single flow so that our model is continually improving, right? So we don't necessarily want to be, we want to basically have a seamless process around the model, which is integrated and changing as it goes along with the tuning on current data and versus historical data. So it's adapting to different changes. And so if you put those pieces together, you start with your simple input-output process-oriented component, which you want to automate. You introduce a component from the outputs, and that goes into insights. So you can go from insights, and that should be it. Or you take it from your insights, and you pass operational parameters to a tuning component, and then that tuning component provides updated instructions, and that's how you improve your process. So you're constantly improving your process by tuning it through an ML model. But ultimately, you've got to start with a process block, which you're trying to automate and simplify. That's the Google way.
Okay, great. Leads me nicely, I think, to ask Clinton, what's the Tricentis way of thinking about this transition from automation to AI and helping your clients get there? And also, how do they make the business case? Because we mustn't forget that there are considerable investments involved here, not least on the data side, but also the technologies and the most expensive component of any IT spend is actually the people. So how are your clients looking at benchmarking the return on investment from these big changes that we're seeing, these big challenges that we're seeing, meeting them?
Sure, Matthew. And the way that we and our customers look at it is we kind of take a holistic approach when we're working with our customers, right? Because when we think about quality, we have to look at it, from a broader perspective, not just UI. We have to look at the functional side. We have to look at performance. We have to look at API, and we have to look at data integrity. So there's several areas of quality that not only, as we talk about, just creating those steady processes, but what are the areas of quality that we need to understand? So typically what we'll do is we will work with a customer and do an assessment. And so before we just take tooling out of the picture, our goal is to really sit down and work with that prospect or customer and really understand their organizational structure, their skill sets, their how they've been doing automation in the past, or how they're just doing testing in general, and look at all those key areas. And when I talk about data integrity, I think this is a huge part of that. Gartner recently had a survey that talked about organizations spend, or it costs organizations $15 million annually on data integrity issues, and $3.1 trillion overall is just wasting and finding data issues each year. So this is a very huge part. So when we start talking about ROI, we have to really work with them to understand, okay, where are the areas where you are most deficient? And where are the areas that we can help you improve upon that, and understand if you implement these particular processes, this is how we can help you calculate what that return on investment is going to be. So it's not going to be really cookie cutter. It's going to be basically customized for each individual. So point is to understand where they are, and understanding if you implement these certain practices, we can help you achieve that level of ROI. And the other thing we have to look at as well, we start talking about not only data integrity, functional, but performance, but we also have to look at web services as well. And we talk about performance testing and performance monitoring. How are we understanding what's happening when these applications are deployed, and how early are you doing performance testing within the software development lifecycle? And so it really comes down to the process and really understanding that and helping them calculate what that ROI is going to be.
Yeah. And we've heard from a number of speakers at our events over the past year that the performance testing does remain a problematic area for many financial firms in terms of, for example, achieving their target rates of automation. I mean, do you think that's correct? And more generally, where do you think firms should be benchmarking themselves in this respect? What percentage of automation do you think they should be achieving and will be achieving? There's probably still on quite a steep curve, aren't we?
Yeah, I would think so. In terms of percentage, it's really hard to say. It's really going to depend on the amount of expertise that you have in order to build that level of performance testing and being able to do it correctly. Because there's also two aspects of, you have performance testing, which looks at, not only performance of load, but also you have to look at performance monitoring and be able to track that and be able to make sure that, that's once the application is released into production, it's going to perform as is expected. So typically what we recommend is, especially if you're implementing, if you're going through a DevOps transformation or a digital transformation and you're implementing DevOps, so within that CI/CD pipeline, we recommend breaking it down into smaller chunks, doing more performance testing in smaller areas earlier in the software development lifecycle. I remember years ago working with various clients, they would do, especially in the early days of Agile development, they would really focus on what they called a hardening sprint, where they would basically go through the process, and at the end, before they would release, they would take a week or 2 weeks and do stringent performance testing. Well, it's very difficult to do that at the end, because now if you find any significant performance bugs or issues, then you have to go back and do a lot of rework. So what we typically recommend is, if you're going to do performance testing, do it early so that you can be able to get the benefits of that. So you don't necessarily have to do a complete end-to-end testing at that point. You can do performance testing on a certain portion of the application, certain components, to really establish a baseline of performance metrics that you can then use as you kind of go forward to releasing your application. So I think that plays a huge part in the success of implementing performance and understanding that return that you're going to get by having to do less of it at the end of the release.
Thank you. So the benefits of automation, keyword benefit, and I'd like to ask you, Djamel, I mean, at Orange Bank, how do you benchmark the ROI from your investment in automation and AI? I mean, and how do you plan on benchmarking going forward? I mean, is it in terms of customer satisfaction, which is a benchmark that of course is important for many, many firms, particularly retail customer facing firms? You can measure that, you can get surveys, you can get your app rated. That's very, very important. But in terms of the actual quality of what you're producing, I mean, do you, for example, do you use code quality benchmarks? How do you do it at Orange Bank?
I think you mentioned in your question you mentioned the two dimensions of the answer. The first one is, of course, the ROI is measured based on the financial asset. So, for instance, we have a Jingo, which is our virtual assistant for our customers. And so what we measure, of course, is the number of conversations that has been handled autonomously by the chatbot without any human transfer. And it's quite easy to measure the ROI, because a chat conversation with a human is estimated to cost around $10. So it means that if we are able to handle autonomously 100,000 conversations, it means that you are saving $1 million. So this is the financial way to measure the return on investment. And so this is, of course, a KPI that we are using at Orange Bank. But the second dimension, and I think, Matthew, you mentioned that in your question, is the customer satisfaction. And we are measuring that, for instance, with Jingo, which is our chatbot. We are measuring that by asking to the customer, are you happy with the answers that has been provided by the bot? And this is also something that is really important, because, of course, cost reduction or return of investment is important. But as I said in my introduction, Orange Bank want to use AI to offer the best user experience. And so we are assessing by asking our customers, our clients, if the answers that has been provided within the bot is good or not. And so we are analyzing the answers from our customers. Another thing that I would like to mention when we are assessing this kind of things is also the delay for processing an operation. For instance, when we started to use AI and automation on different processes, we have processes that requested several days to have an answers for our customers, and we were able to reduce the time from 7 days to less than 1 day. And this is also something that is important, because when the customers receive the answers within 24 hours, you improve the user experience than receiving the answers in 5 or 10 days or so on. This is also something that we measure, is the delay, the reduction of the delay for different requests.
Yeah. So human feedback is really still very important, and I know that we had a speaker from one of the largest UK retail banks, their head of app delivery, speaking at one of our events last year while we were still holding live events, was saying that they use their call center staff, who are perhaps not so busy as they used to be, because they've automated most of the incoming calls, but they use those call center staff, the human beings, to actually verify that answers are being correctly given. So we're equally dependent on human testing, on crowd testing, really crowdsourced testing, because it's coming back from your customers.
Yeah.
Okay. Rochak, this really interesting point about standards for software quality. In the capital markets, firms are dealing with maybe as many as 90 different regulatory regimes, some of which are more prescriptive than others. I mean, the Bank of Japan has relatively new guidelines, I understand, about defining the parameters of algos, trading algos, more transparently, and asking financial firms to do that. The Monetary Authority of Singapore has written guidelines for IT risk management. I wanted to ask you, do you see firms coming together to talk more about shared standards for software quality that they can take to regulators and say, hey, look, this is what we're doing?
I mean, yeah, it's a really good question. Actually, if I may, on your previous point, which Djamel was answering around chatbots, I just wanted to mention that, one of the things we also really a proponent of, and some products that we have around virtual agents. So around just, as opposed to just conversational support, one of the things we've noticed in dialogue, oriented discussions is that we've got services that let basically assist the human agent. So the human agent can do what they're doing. And as Matthew was referring to, you can actually record and listen, but actually give really good responses and answers to the virtual agent, to the human agent, by the virtual agent, so that they can give more insightful descriptions. So if you don't have to go away and research something, it's like a little helper on the side that kind of discusses it. So I just thought I'd jump in and throw that in there, because I thought it was interesting. But to your point, Matthew, it's a really good question. I think.
Yeah, Rochak, if I may interrupt you, it's very interesting the point that you're mentioning, because we are doing exactly what you're saying. So we have a chatbot, which is Jingo, on B2C for our customers, but we are also developing some chatbot solution to help the different employees of Orange Bank. And this is exactly what you are describing, is really to help them to find the correct answers more quickly and more efficiently.
Exactly. No, because I get really excited about that, because often people always think we need to automate the customer's problem directly, but actually you can assist the assistance agent much more, also just as well, make it a really good experience. So really, that resonated a lot to me. So Matthew, coming back to your question, yes, in terms of regulation, when we think about reliability and regulation, these things do play a very interesting role. Where Google, you asked how Google and whether we're seeing this in client discussions, we are. And I think what's happening more is people, across capital markets are starting to accept or adopt cloud-oriented models a lot more, which means that they start to see how are regulatory requirements, especially around reliability and availability, being met by cloud-oriented products. So when you think about algorithmic trading, for example, algorithmic trading was a bespoke product. It was a bundled sort of offering, but as part of MiFID II, it's been debundled. So that our clients, for example, as part of MiFID II, sell-side firms actually have to be more transparent about what has the algo actually done, how it's found liquidity, how it's traded, what is the strategy, did it meet the strategy in the right way, and did it do it in a reliable fashion, did it do it as part of best execution. So these are attributes of markets very specifically that need to be justified and explained. And when you need to explain all these, standardizations really help. So in European markets compared to US markets, we have a very different ecosystem, because in US markets, you have a SIP, which is a consistent price. While in European markets, you have fragmented markets. So each country has its own currencies, different types of trading activities. So what you need is a consolidated oriented methodology to create those kind of execution-based models. And that's happening. So we see capital market firms talking around these spaces. They are thinking around solutions. They're thinking about consolidated space around it. Not only do we think about it from an algorithmic trading perspective that you mentioned, Matthew, but post-trades are a really important area. So all these firms have huge amounts of obligations around regulatory and around reporting. So if you think about it, if all those reportings aspects are happening as part of every single firm's entity, could we think about mergers, and could we think about different kind of technologies that could apply more holistically across the equilibrium? One of the articles I read recently was around Credit Suisse and UBS thinking about merging some of their back office technologies. That is a result of tighter regulation, tighter around automation, which is allowing you to have a good solution around and reliable solution at the back end around reporting for regulatory purposes, but also operating more effectively. So we are obviously very close to those types of discussions and helping that ecosystem evolve. As Google, we're a technology company. We're in the business to provide software and provide really, really good tools so people can build these applications and meet the regulatory requirements in a highly effective and reliable way.
Okay, we've got time for a couple of questions. Thank you for that answer, Rochak, thorough answer. We should get our questions in from our audience, and we've got a question about CO2, and in looking at this business case for automation, in looking at this business case for investment in AI, what role does the reduction, or what challenges does the reduction in CO2 emissions play in this? And I know from my own experience, every time that you fill out a form now looking for investment, looking for government grants, looking for any kind of new partnership, you have to answer a question on sustainability, and you have to think about your business in those terms. So Clinton, I guess this is something you've come across. It's a live question, so we haven't prepped this one in any way. But is this issue of sustainability one that is going to drive more and more decisions over the next year in terms of automation technologies?
I think from a testing perspective, this is not something we come across as often, but I think as we, especially if you look at with the amount of automation that needs to take place and the amount of power that it takes for AI and machine learning, that you're going to start to see a greater concern in terms of CO2 emissions. So I think what is happening is this is going to really help shed a light because of the increased usage. So from a quality perspective, it's not something that we deal with directly or as often, but I do see this as we kind of move into this new era in terms of how we work and where we work with these restrictions, where this is going to become top of mind for most companies.
Okay, great. Of course, the role of data centers is extremely important in this. So Djamel, maybe you could tell us how you assess this risk and this opportunity for CO2 and other sustainability issues in your strategy and your investment. But also, we had a question about, and I'll paraphrase it because it's a long question, but the upshot of it is, how good are software companies and software tool vendors of QA solutions at producing the kind of tools that you need at Orange Bank. Just a general view on how you see the role of third-party vendors in terms of innovation and helping you get down your journey. So two questions there, if you don't mind. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, sure. At Orange Bank, we are using open source software. So thanks to Google and Facebook and all the big companies, they are providing TensorFlow or PyTorch or AI frameworks that we are using for developing our artificial intelligence models. So we don't use services of software companies. As I said, for my point of view, the main issue is on the data. I think thanks to the open source community and open source communities, we are able to use state-of-the-art algorithm. And I think Google is providing a lot of tools and algorithm and help us a lot to develop our models. For instance, when we are developing our text mining model, which allow us to understand the content of the email, we are using TensorFlow. It's open source. It's very well documented. There is a community that is supporting that. So we are more using open source software at the time being. If I may say something on the question about CO2 and green AI, which is a hot topic. So we are not at Orange. I'm talking about the Orange Group, but there is an initiative on the Orange Group on green AI, the topic of green AI, on which we are starting to think what is the best way to use AI to reduce the CO2 impact. Let me just give you an example. I was talking about retraining the model, improving the model, etc. So now we are thinking about the CO2 impact to see is it worth training your model every day if you get an improvement of 1%. So the idea is really to see if you're training your week and your improvement is very low, it would be maybe better to train your model every month or every 3 months and to lower your CO2 impact. And this is something that we are starting to think within the Orange Group to see what is the best strategy to still keep the model at a high performance, but to lower the CO2 impact. And this, of course, comes with the electricity consumption, but also on the frequency on which you retrain your model. And this is something that we are starting to think of. We don't have a specific strategy on that, but within the Orange Group, it's really important for the Orange Group to adapt what we call the green AI, and so to still have a high performance on the AI model, but to lower down the CO2 impact.
Good. Well, thank you for that thorough question. And I know that I think Rochak at Google, you have a policy on CO2 as well.
Yeah, no, I thought we'd run out of time, but I think the key is that we're one of the biggest users of renewable energy. We're very committed to making sure we can minimize CO2 where possible. And I think most firms are aiming to get to renewable energy. We're at 100%. We're a big user of renewable energy. But the biggest thing I'd like to leave you as a takeaway from my side is that at Google we intend to be carbon free by 2030. Right, so that means if you use our data centers, if you use GCP oriented products, our data centers are going to be carbon free by 2030. We already, very far ahead in that energy utilization space, and so obviously, it helps minimize CO2 as where we possible because we're trying to give back and be as renewable as possible.
Good. Clinton, I'd like to, we're just running out of time now. I'd just like to ask you, just finally, maybe just to sum up a couple of takeaways, perhaps from what we've been discussing. But how do you feel? We're all coming out of, hopefully, we're coming out of a very, very challenging year, a year where there's been opportunities for some businesses, but for many, it's really been a struggle to fund the kind of investment that perhaps had been planned in 2019. How optimistic are you for your business in 2021?
Actually, I'm very optimistic because it, as devastating as the pandemic has been, for the world, I think from a business perspective, you look at certain industries that are really going to see a significant uptick. And I think because it's forcing businesses to change the way that they work, how they work, and the types of solutions that they need in order to work more efficiently, that it's really going to be a boon for just the technology industry in general, and specifically for testing, because now quality is even more important in understanding where the bottlenecks are and understanding how big of a role quality plays in the overall software development lifecycle. And I think this is putting a spotlight on it. And we're seeing a lot of organizations saying, help us understand how we can do this better, how we can do it faster, how we can do it much more efficiently. So I think the future looks bright from that perspective, especially from a quality standpoint, because when you have significant, things that are happening in the world that causes you to really put a spotlight on it, it makes a huge difference. So.
Yeah. I think 2020 has been for a lot of people has been like, let's get through this, work.
Exactly.
We all want to get back to a bit of planning. Great. So thank you. Thank you, Djamel. Thank you, Rochak. And thank you, Clinton. Thank you for joining us. Our next session in the series is on December 16th, when the topic we're going to be drilling down into is going to be change management and how software quality assurance, software development sits within that broad strategic objective. Most financial firms run change and digital transition programs over 3 to 5 years. Where does quality sit in that process, and what's changing there? So that's December the 16th. And if you've registered for this session, you're already registered for that one. So that's good news. And we'll remind you about that by email as the time approaches. If you would like to visit either Tricentis or Broadcom in our virtual exhibition centre, just go back to your timeline and you can go in there and you can have a chat if you wish and ask further questions. But well, thank you very much again, gentlemen, for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.